Mr. Bagley, members of the board, we do have several items for board discussion this evening. Our first two items will be covered by Mrs. Aug. She will be discussing middle school instrument fee and state report card. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Aug.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board, I have two items for you tonight. The first is to share a fee increase related to middle school orchestra. This fee increased from $25 to $50 from last year to this year, but we did not capture that on the fee list or in the program of studies. So this change has already been communicated to students and parents, but we wanted to make sure that you are aware as well. And then this item would be on the next agenda for your approval. So that concludes my first item for tonight. The second item I have for you is to share a very brief overview of the state report card. I am not going to get into the weeds tonight. I'll save that for the November presentation. However, I did want to let the board know that the district met state expectations on 4 of the components. We earned 3 stars, and remember we're on the star system now, so it's a potential of 5 stars, and 3 means that we met state expectations. So we earned 3 stars in achievement, progress, graduation, and early literacy, and we earned 5 stars on gap closing for the second year in a row. And gap closing is that component that measures the reduction in educational gaps for our student subgroups. So we're very happy to see this because it means that our Fairfield students are growing at a higher rate than state expectations, and that we are closing those gaps for our students in this, lingering post-pandemic era. This was also the first time that the state gave out overall ratings to districts and schools. Again, a star rating. On the overall rating, you can earn a half a point. You cannot on just the component ratings. So we earned 3.5 stars as a district, which means we are meeting state expectations and that we are on the cusp of exceeding those expectations. So next year. I won't get into all of the component details for each one of our buildings, but I can tell you that all of our buildings are either meeting or exceeding state standards based on their overall ratings. I'd especially like to highlight 4 of our elementary buildings. Compass Elementary earned an overall rating of 4, which means they're exceeding state expectations, and North, South, and Central earned overall ratings of 4.5. So kudos to them for exceeding state expectations. Again, that's a very high-level overview for you tonight. We do have a lot of things to celebrate and, of course, things to work on. We are still #1 among the bigs in Butler County. We have to share it this year with Lakota, but that's okay. It still looks good from the top. And then, looking at similar district data, just in general, we're right there in the middle of the pack or the upper part of the pack in each of the component areas. So just very proud to report that. And these successes are really a testament to the instructional leadership that we have in our buildings and the hard work of our teachers and staff. So if you or anyone who's watching want to dig more deeply into the report cards, it's very easy. You can just Google ODE report cards, and the Ohio Department of Education has a portal. You can go in and look specifically at our just district report card or an individual building if you want to through that portal. So that concludes my other item for board discussion tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Aug. Let me see if I can quote Mr. Smith here. A report card should never define us.
That is.
Yeah, when it's this good, let's celebrate.
I know.
I added that to the
Absolutely, we'll take it.
good stuff.
Thank you. All right, our next item for board discussion is in regard to a board policy. I will turn it over to Dr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Bagley, and members of the board. Under items for board discussion, number 3, board policy, I have one piece of policy for discussion, letter A. In your board packet, I've included a copy of previous language and the proposed language as per OSBA. Letter A, policy IGAE, which is health education. This is a revision to previous policy. Senate Bill 288 became effective in April of 2023, but many of its many of its requirements were not scheduled to become effective until this school year. We have waited a while to address this policy until ODE requirements and resources were established. As with many things, ODE had to create a process and resources after the legislation passed the law. This law updates the curriculum for health education, adding requirements related to child sexual abuse prevention, dating violence prevention, and sexual violence prevention. Beginning this school year, schools are mandated to provide developmentally appropriate annual instruction in child sexual abuse prevention to students in grades K through 6. Also starting this school year, schools are mandated to provide developmentally appropriate instruction in dating violence prevention education and sexual violence education to students grades 7 through 12. Districts must notify parents and guardians of students who receive instruction related to child sexual abuse prevention and sexual violence prevention. Notices must include, as per the policy and the law, that this instruction is required part of the district's curriculum, and upon request, parents and guardians may examine instructional materials, and upon written request, the student can be excused from taking instruction in these areas. Additionally, this law requires, and I think this is important to highlight, public schools to incorporate training on child sexual abuse into its required in-service training for teachers and other professionals. So private, parochial, charter schools are not required. This required training must be presented by law enforcement officers or prosecutors who have experience in handling cases involving child sexual abuse or child sexual violence. So that is another hurdle that we're going to have to overcome, finding very limited resources to provide this professional development for us. Please let me know if you have any questions about this policy. That concludes all the items I have for your consideration tonight.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question about it. Was this particular policy, I don't know, were there any precursors to this policy, like an increase in the amount of abuse of minors that was reported? Do you know anything about that? I mean,
Yeah, Miss Aug is the point person for all the curricular changes, so she has some information about some background to the law.
great.
So this particular piece of legislation, there's actually a woman named Erin in that Erin's Law, and she has been advocating for this to be incorporated into Ohio Revised Code for a long time. We're actually like I want to say the 35th or 36th state that has adopted some form of Erin's Law. And so she has been, advocating for this for many years, actually. And just this past year is when the legislators finally passed something into law. So Ohio is definitely not alone in this. And, she has been a big advocate to incorporate this into public schools and that education based on her own life experiences. And there is a website that you can go to learn more about her story and why she's such an advocate for this type of education in our schools.
Okay, thank you. I understand that. But if I reading this correctly, so public charters are exempt?
I may have misspoke on that. Public schools have to do this.
Right.
All
Public
others
schools,
do
but
not.
Charters, public charters specifically?
No, I believe public charters would have to do it.
Public
If they're a
charters.
public entity, they have to do it.
Okay. And were there any extra, or any talk about any extra funding in order to implement it?
I think Ms. Aug can talk about that as well, because the state advertises free options for the training, but
Yeah, so this is an unfunded mandate. We had to choose from a list of resources that the state of Ohio provided for us. They had to have at least one free option on that list for us to use. The interesting thing with all of that is we are required by law to implement any program with fidelity. And this requires 1 hour of instruction per year for students in grades K through 6, and then 7 through 12, it can be delivered in their health classes. Some of the free programs that they gave us were hours beyond the requirement. Hours that we don't feel like we could have, taken away from other areas of instruction. So, just to give you an example, for grades 7 through 12, we did end up purchasing a curriculum because we felt better met the needs of our students and our teachers for the learning. So, but no, Ohio is not going to reimburse us for that purchase. It wasn't too bad.
Okay.
Sorry, Nancy, it was just a couple $100.
Okay, thank you. I just thought that we covered a lot of this in the classes that we have now. So that was my understanding, is that we...
And you're right, in our health classes, 7 through 12, a lot of these were already being addressed, and they were already a part of the Ohio health curriculum requirements. It's the biggest change is that K to 6 component.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Our next two items for board discussion will be covered by Mr. Perry. He will be talking about a roofing project for 2024 and the Ohio Safety Grant. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Begley, members of the board. I have two items for board discussion this evening. The first item is roof repair and replacement, which is one of the capital project items that we continue to maintain throughout the district. I am finalizing the scope of work and agreements for the summer of 2024. The goal will be to present the final scope and contract to the board for action at the next few meetings. This will allow us to lock in 2023 pricing, even though the work will be completed during the summer months of 2024. The second item for discussion is an update on the Ohio Safety Grants. We received funding in 2021 and 2022 totaling $700,000 for 7 buildings. The remaining funds must be under contract for safety-related projects by the end of December 2023. I am working to finalize details and present those to the board for action again at the next few meetings as well. All these funds are from the grants and do not affect the general fund. This will exhaust all of the Ohio Safety Grant funds we have received. Because these projects are sizable expenditures, I wanted to provide the board with some information and an opportunity for questions before requesting a vote for approval. That concludes my items for board discussion. Do you have any questions?
I don't think so. I think it's great to lock in prices now, right, in these inflationary times. Does that mean we have to put money down or pay for any of those now, or just agree to contract?
No, all we have to do is have a board-approved contract, and then we'll issue the PO, which that would officially lock in the materials, which they would place the order immediately for, which again, that helps us as well with, as we all know, with back orders and lead times. So to me, this really helps us not only financially, but also for scheduling purposes, so we can hit the ground running in schools as soon as school lets out in late May.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.